Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored to be here. It's very exciting stuff that, we can share all of these stories, let's just set the context here. I think first let's look at what is the reason I'm here. So that's, I think, one of the, let's look at some numbers here. 4.7 million downloads in 100 days. $1 million in less than 87 days. We've been in the top 100 grossing charts in 74 countries on the App Store. Top 100 grossing game, 32 countries overall. Top 100 grossing casual games in about 102 countries on Google Play. Top 100 overall in about 17 countries on Google Play. Yeah, so, those numbers look great, but see, the thing is, it's not all, we did a lot of mistakes. I'm here to talk about the mistakes and, how did it all start? Because, what people see is, all these vanity metrics and, think, okay, they must have, had an easy walk and stuff like that. But I think it's important to understand how it all starts, and so I'll try and share as much as I can. Hopefully that helps you. Number one, I think it's important to really understand the audience. I think it's very, very vital to understand who you're building this game for. In our studio, we have this picture of our demography, a lookalike of how that person looks like. And, we started imagining everything about the game around that person who's actually going to play the game. So it was very tough. Believe me when I say this, it's very difficult to understand what women want. So you have to start somewhere. But for us, it was trying to understand their preferences, their device preferences, what is the time in the day that they engage with the game, their likes and dislikes. There's a ton of stuff that you can really try to understand. There's a lot of data already available out there in the market. You just need to look for it. And at the end of the day, we were a bunch of guys who were building games for the female audience. So it's not easy to align with them. But thankfully we had this great team, which was, in the first few months we were just trying to understand, the demography to the depths that, we even watched movies that they would end up watching and then align ourselves with that. For us, it took about 14 games to get to this one game. We kept experimenting a lot. Like Edison said, I have not failed, but found 1,000 ways that it did not work. So, it's similar in nature, right? We're building games, but then not every game is going to, get there. But I guess it's the persistence that you need to have to, keep trying and iterating and see what that, one magic formula is going to. I'll go deeper into how and what. I think data, it's data overrules everything. When you start, you're starting based on opinions, you're starting based on assumptions, theories. There's a lot of debate about your design versus my design, and I think this and you think that. I guess, at the end of the day, the data has to decide, right? otherwise it's just my word against yours. I mean, how do you come to a conclusion about any such theory? For us, we saw that a lot of our theories when we started off were proved wrong by data. So just to give you an example, when you saw the location map, the city selection screen, we saw that a lot of users were not going into certain locations. So one of our guys come up and say, you know what, we should just offer a discount on one of these locations and, let them just, burn through that content, So, and they had a lot of theory backing that hypothesis, right? Now, we said, it all sounds good and, let's just go out and test it out. So we put that build out there. What we realized was that the spenders were actually burning through that content and the non-paying users just couldn't get there. So at the end of the day, so we realized that, it was startling that, on paper it looks fantastic, but in reality it doesn't really work. So the drawback of data is that at some point in time you will lose the motivation. The team wants to push the build out, and you have this theory that you want to validate everything with data. There will be a lot of frustration. There will be that urge to release. You know what? I trust this. Let's just release this. But I guess you can't overrule data. I mean, that's the hard fact. You have to be motivated enough to see it through the end of the tunnel. You have to trust your data. You have to go through that experience. You can't just jump and, there are no shortcuts in this. And that's what we realized. There is a poster of this in our studio. In God we trust, all others must bring data. I guess in gaming, I think this is something that holds true no matter who's building the game. If you don't play the games that you build, nobody will. So it so happens that you're so consumed in building the game, you just get tired of playing it again and again, But then the fact is that you have to get everybody involved in the building process. So the friends and family and everybody, they need to be a part of this journey. You need to see their reactions. Eventually you will start losing a track of what kind of emotions are getting triggered in the players who are playing this game. I think that first wow moment of, interacting with the game, I guess that's what you're after at the end of the day. And eventually, the guys who are building the game are, I've seen the screen a billion times now, I'm bored of it. But then, see, the fact is that, you have to drink your own poison. You have to drink it till it doesn't kill you, and then eventually gets you high. That's essentially what it is. People will come and go, the process you build will remain. I think successful companies are built on the foundation of the processes. I mean, it's not built on people. I mean, people as in, they cannot be celebrities who are going to say that, I have the celebrity guy in my team and that's the foundation of my company. If you're going to build a successful company, it's going to be based on the processes that you build. There has to be continuity. People will just come and go. That's the fact. Choose your tech wisely. I mean, eventually you will be married to it. You can't just go back and undo what you've done. You have to look at what is scalable, what is going to work with you. I think the ecosystem also matters a lot. The skill sets that are available in the market. There has to be longevity. When you need help, reach out. I mean, we have had tremendous amount of help from people from unknown places. People, sometimes even our office boys have come and given us advice on, what, I like this screen, I mean, this is really fun in the game. He doesn't speak the language, but he can communicate through emotions. And that's exactly the point, right? I mean, you're in the business of triggering those emotions. And those emotions come from anywhere and everywhere. Your players are your first, second, and third priority, period. You are building experiences for them, and they are in turn investing time in your game. You have to talk to them, you have to understand them, you have to listen to their feedback, you have to iterate and make them a part of the build process. You cannot build a game in isolation. How did this all start for us? Let's just, so we are actually a boutique IT company. We still are. I mean, that's another part of our business. We spent 12 years making software to make you productive. I mean, Nukebox is accused of making you unproductive. That's what games do, but we essentially are the process guys. We try to bring in processes to everything we do. So at least that way, the outcome is predictable. Because there's always this debate that, can the creative process, be predictable? Because, the entire industry is creative in nature. But I guess, unless it is scientific in nature, the outcome can never be predictable. So for us, the biggest satisfaction we would have had was that we spent 3 years in building Nukebox as a studio. If we failed, it would have been an epic fail, because by the end of it, we would have had a process, but no hits under its belt. So the best way to validate that is, and the verdict is out there. There's something that has come out of all this which essentially proves that. So we are a team of about 33 people. Trust me, there are no celebrities in this team. It's not that, I'm X this or X that, and, they're all people like you and me, and, it's just a regular team. But then they had the conviction to build something. And that conviction can come when you can build these iteratively and, trust the product that you're going to come out with. We started out as a service-oriented, work-for-hire kind of a studio. But then you have to stop that somewhere. If you're going to build your own IPs, you cannot do both. At least for us, it didn't work because there is too many distractions. So we put a full stop and said, hey, you know what? Let's just focus on building our own games and get that right. So at some point in time, you have to go all in. It's a game of poker, right? Unless you're all in, it's just a half-hearted attempt to build something. So there is this huge debate about, a lot of people tell me it's not even a debate, gaming is a hit business, But is it really? Let's just try to understand this. So I think let's try to define what hit means for each one of us. For some it means, is it downloads? Or is it that, it has to be, you're making money for it to be commercially successful? Finally, you need to have food on the table. So unless it's making money, you're not building games for charity, are you? So let's draw parallels. Even the movie industry is considered to be, hits business. You have a star cast, you have a script, there's this magic formula of, bring this celebrity and, we have perhaps a hit going. But even that has failed, right? So, the bigger difference is, there is a scientific way of doing things and there is the, non-scientific way of doing things. You build an entire movie and the moment you release it, you're expecting and you're keeping your fingers crossed. In the games industry, again, if we are talking about drawing parallels, the biggest difference between a production which has not been tested or it has not been built in an iterative fashion, there is a lot of hidden surprises at the end of it. But out here, you're trying to get that feedback loop. You're trying to build that entire game based on the feedback that is coming through to the players. So the effort that has to go in has to be of trying to predict that outcome. So can we look at it as a TV series? I think Netflix is doing something similar, right? I mean, The Big Bang Theory, season 1 was released when, the first season came out, and that was their testing ground of trying to understand, does this really sell? And it blew the lids off them, and they realized it's not just Netflix. I'm just giving examples of what TV series have done. I mean, content consumption, the patterns have changed, the passive entertainment industry. You test that hypothesis, you know that the season is working, then you come up with the subsequent iterations in the new episodes. So I guess in gaming, you're trying to do something similar, right? I mean, you're trying to soft launch a game, validate your hypothesis, working, not working, then investing further into it. So for us, we set out to build that process. So I'm trying to break it down into 3 hard components. I think it's going to be the art, science, and commerce of game development. So in India, we have this obsession of slotting people into, you're from the arts background. After 10th, you choose whether you want to join commerce or science or whatever it is. So there is this stereotyping which happens, whether we like it or not, that's been the nature of it. So I always had a problem with that. Why can't it be a combination of all of these skill sets? I mean, you can't go out in the industry and say, I'm going to have a unified perspective, or I'm going to build based on my perspective of how games are built. But the reality is it's a combination of all of these skill sets, right? So let's look at the art of it. I mean, you have to, I think most people in this room will understand this. I mean, you have to be obsessed with quality. At the end of the day, the players are investing a ton of their time in your game. Why would they play a suboptimal game? There is enough and more content out there for them to consume. So unless there is ROI for them, they're never going to play this game. So this is what happened with us when we started testing out our icons. If I look back at our first icon when we soft launched it, we were getting 5% of the store conversions. So eventually, when we released the game, we had 30% store conversions coming out of this icon. So you have to take your icon very seriously. I can't deliberate upon this fact enough. That's the first thing the player is seeing. So that was our first food truck. I mean, it looks miserable now that you look at it. But then we didn't wait for the polished art to come in. We started shipping as early as we had a food truck. But the whole point was to establish that hypothesis, whether food trucks as a concept works or not. So there's different hypotheses you're proving. I mean, we were just measuring day 1 retention at that point in time. But see, the thing is, where do you stop? I mean, I hear enough and more people say that, I'm never satisfied with the kind of quality that we're producing. We are always polishing. But you have to stop somewhere, right? This was the first city selection screen that we had. And this is what, in at least the third or the fourth iteration. Again, we didn't wait for this polished art. So this itself was a lot of effort. So, of course, the team wanted to do this, but they said, this is going to take a lot of time. Let's just have a baseline, put that out in the market, let's measure it. And then, there is always time and more to do more. So the attention to detail will matter a lot. It's a small world, right? It's so intricate. The players are engrossed in their mobile phone, spending a lot of time looking at the details that you're putting in there. So I guess it's the culmination of all of those small details that you bring in eventually. So this was a few hours of effort. This was a few days of effort. But did we wait for those few days and wait for these characters to come in? No, we didn't. We just said, you know what, let's just get this out first. So let's look at the science of it. So I again want to kind of set an anchor point of two different industries, the passive entertainment and the interactive entertainment. So this is one of my favorite examples. I don't know how many of you remember back in the day when, you know, we had very little content coming on the television, right? So we had the Mahabharat, the great Mahabharat. So there was a fantastic appointment mechanism that you have to come back every Sunday at 9 a.m. and that's when you see one episode of the epic story. And there's a huge amount of curiosity that was built up. Now those were the days of passive entertainment, and today we are talking about you can binge the entire series of Game of Thrones in like a few days, and so on and so forth. There's enough and more happening in the evolution of the passive entertainment industry itself. Similarly, in the interactive entertainment space, we have examples of the evolution of from consoles to PCs, and there's been like we're talking about mobile. I think the beauty of it is that a lot of this content, there's been this evolution of paid content to freemium, and a lot of these games initially were built based on certain market research which was done. So I think what has now happened is that the mobile has given a huge amount of power in our hands. So we have this ability to complete that feedback loop and get all of the data that we need to establish the hypothesis that we are trying to prove. So in a way, there is a huge amount of power in your hands, provided that you utilize that to your advantage. So you can measure literally everything, right? So if you can measure it, you can improve it. So that's the only way of improving something. If you can't measure something, how do you improve? What is your baseline? So for us, everything that we are putting out in the market, this is the loop that we are trying to follow. So at least you are in control of the data that is coming back to you. So I guess you need to listen to your data. A lot of the time there is instances of my data is telling me something else, but my design instincts are telling me something else. So how do you draw a conclusion based on that? So I guess if you're measuring the right things in the right KPIs, I think essentially we are trying to drive retention, we're trying to drive engagement, we're trying to drive monetization. So if all of the effort that you're putting in is not bumping up one of these KPIs, I guess it's not really meaningful, right? So at the same time, don't measure everything. We have had instances of analysis paralysis. Oh, this data is saying something and that data is saying something. Are we in the right place? Don't know. But as I said, you have to be looking at actionable data. Unless it is actionable, it's nothing. Here's an example. And for us, in the early days, this is the soft launch data. This is not how it looks right now, but we had multiple locations within the game. We saw early on in the funnel, there was a huge drop off between the first location and the second location. This was an absolute linear system in the game. So there was no other progression system but this. So what we realized was, if we have to improve this funnel, we have to actually experiment with some bold decisions. So what we did was we made that into a non-linear system, which meant that after the first location, you have the possibility of unlocking two different locations. So, and there was a huge jump. Literally, so players now have choice. So that meant that they still continue playing. So that actually improved the early retention by a huge margin. So, fail fast. The idea is that you don't want to wait for your final product. So the KPIs that you essentially want to drive is retention, engagement, and monetization. So everything that we do, we are trying to bump those numbers. And if some of the features are not working, we are split testing, we are trying to understand, oh, this doesn't work, let's just switch this off, move on. And that's the iteration that the game. So even today, we are doing bold experiments. We are trying to say, you know what, this is not good enough. Let's just, try to bring in a new meta into the game. Let's try to bring in, try to improve the long tail retention of it. So those experiments are happening, will happen, will continue to happen. Ship early, ship often. The later you ship, the more features you're shipping without the feedback. So we're talking about soft launch here, right? We've been in soft launch for about 6 months. For us, we said, you know what, we're not going to wait for the full 10 locations that we were aiming for. We had just one location with 40 levels in it. We said, you know what, let's just start testing this. So we picked one country, soft launched it, started getting our day one retention. So at least we could measure our day one retention. So the day one retention actually gave us some confidence that, you know what, we're onto something. So you need to have a gating system. You have to kill the project if it is not working. For us, we killed quite a few projects. We realized that no matter what the stage, we had a game which was almost ready to ship. And then we realized that, the long tail retention of it is just not there. So even if you release it, it's not going to work. I mean, we might make a little money, but then you have to pick your battles, right? If we had invested our time and effort in that, I guess Food Truck Chef wouldn't have happened for us. So I think that's a big one, right? Because you know at what stage you want to stop your project. The earlier the better, of course. But then you have a certain amount of resources, you have a certain amount of time. You can't just, live in the world of dreams and say, you know what, this is the best game that ever has come out in the market and this is going to work. And that's exactly the point that I'm trying to establish here, that you are relying on your data to establish that at every point in time. So, for us, when did it occur to us that this is something that is working for us? In December last year, we were working on 2 potential titles which could have been launched. One of the games, they both had similar numbers, but this one particularly had slightly more day one retention. At that point in time, we were measuring the F2E throughput, we were measuring content burn rate, and then we had spent some amount of money on user acquisition to get those users to establish the throughput. And then we saw our first dollar trickle in that day. And then somebody came back and told us, you know what? The amount of money that we had spent in to acquire those users, we have already recovered those in 3 days. And that's when it occurred to us that, we are really onto something with this game. So if it wasn't that, we would have been, still onto it. We were not even focusing on monetization at that point in time. And that's the beauty of it. Now, we could have waited we couldn't have even soft launched it. We could have just released the game. But we said, you know what, this is just an indication. Do you ride your entire success philosophy based on that one indication? No. You have the baseline, this entire content is going to be built on the scalability of it. So, and that's when we started working on all of those things. Now let's look at the commerce of it. The fact is, freemium is here to stay. I guess that's a no-brainer, right? As a developer, you're taking all the risk by giving away the game for free. So you better get it right. The economy system, you're essentially monetizing time. And if players are investing their time, you need to figure out a method in which you're going to monetize that time. And when I say monetization, doesn't necessarily mean in-app purchases or the economy. There are several ways of monetizing the non-spenders as well. As long as players are engaging with your game, eventually there will be monetization. So we are essentially in the virtual goods business, aren't we? So unlike the e-commerce space in the country, where the unit economics people talk about, it's just not there, but there's still a huge amount of investment happening in. The beauty of gaming is that the first user that you acquire, let's say you spent $1 in acquiring that user. You can see monetization trickle in within a few hours of acquiring that user. So there's absolutely no barrier in terms of distribution, there's no barrier in terms of fulfillment and all of that stuff. So, and that ability to do that is just available to you and everybody here. The mobile ecosystem has done a great deal to, democratize the distribution. You should try and get traffic to a website, for a web game. That's when you'll realize that, to get that one user to a browser-based game, how difficult it is. Just by being in the App Store, by virtue of that, you're getting a few hundred downloads every single day. I think a lot of people here take that for granted. The ability to get more users to your game is a factor of you build a fantastic game, but then you need to have a fantastic storefront to get those users. So all of those things are available to you. It's not that there's going to be a magic wand which is going to get waved. Gone are the days. We're not talking about viral hits anymore, right? Virality is not the scientific way of building games. You can't hope to have a viral hit. The App Store is a great equalizer. Everybody is on equal terms. Anybody can build a game and publish it themselves, including kids. So the music industry, Steve Jobs said, you know what? The music industry has been very uptight about distribution. So you have to go through a publisher to publish your music. And that's when they got the iPod and they started democratizing distribution of music. In a way, gaming is exactly the same situation, right? They have democratized distribution, and today you don't really have to go to a publisher to publish a game. Of course, they bring in a lot of skill sets, they bring in a lot of value, but then you have the ability to do that yourself. Here's the question. So when we talk about commerce, a lot of people are averse about user acquisition. So here are two scenarios. Which one do you guys think is, the right approach? 1,000 users for $1 or about 100 users for $10? Anybody? Yeah. So how about now? Yeah, so it's not about downloads. I guess it's the quality of the user. So if you're getting 100 users who are spending about $30 in a game, that's a no-brainer, right? That scenario is giving you $3,000 of yield, and here you spend about $1 each, but it's just $100. This is just playing, but they're not spending in the game. So you need to be really focused on how you derive that, the quality of where you find these quality of users and try to get those users to your game. So the beauty of it is, since you're doing the media buying, you can measure everything. So you need to have certain basics in place. You have to have attribution in place. today, the user acquisition has become so powerful that you have the ability to target audiences which never. Think of it. The biggest companies in the world today are companies which are driving user acquisition. Google does that. Facebook does that. They've built on the foundation that they are giving you those targeting options to get your players. So it's all essentially metric driven, right? You're trying to get that quality of users. It's not just traffic. So game as a service. Your players will engage with the game as long as you support the game. You will have that temptation of building a lot of games. But is that the right strategy? We had this temptation when Food Truck Chef was released and it started working. You know what? Let's just build another game and let's launch it. We will have two sources of income, all of that stuff. But then we realized, it's at the end of the day, you're creating another front for yourself, and you will not be able to support it with the amount of resources that you have. So for us, we had that content scalability in place that we had the ability to release new locations every 3 weeks with 40 new levels coming in. So there is enough and more that we have in front of us for the next year or so. So which means that there is this content cadence which is going to continue, and there is this huge ability of ramping up our user acquisition so that we're getting in fresh set of players at the same time we're improving the long-term retention of the game. Get players back when they're churning, have those micro events in place. There are enough and more ways of getting players back to the game. Celebrate with players when they're celebrating, so make your game the destination of whatever festival is happening around them. We just did a Halloween update and our players came back and they enjoyed it, they loved it. So there was this one player who wrote to us that, I ended up spending so much time on this game, my entire family was involved during Halloween playing this game. So you have created those moments for them, and that's exactly what game as a service is, right? You are involved in the journey of that player. Accommodate everyone with offers. It's not just the spenders that you're after, right? There is the non-spenders. So you need to have those loops which has enough progression and enough things for them to keep engaged with. I think this is a big one. Community management is something which is going to be extremely important going forward for everyone. So you have to have this two-way communication. It's not that, you build the game and that's the end of the story. So here are some very interesting examples. We had this player, we still have, she doesn't speak the language, but the entire 4-month conversation has been going on through emojis. So she sends us something, we send her something, and we're just having fun here. And this has been going on for 4 months, can you believe that? So there is this other player that we had who was stuck in a hurricane. So we sent our best wishes, and she liked it. She said, you know what, you guys are not just building games, you're appreciating the fact and engaging with them. And that's the level that you need to go to. It's not that there are problems, you're solving those problems, those are happening any which way. But this is what builds a community. Don't build everything yourself. I think this not invented here syndrome exists in a lot of places. So our developers had this huge debate, I'm going to write this code from scratch. I don't trust any other code. So for them, you have to draw the line somewhere. The ability to move fast can come in only when we start collaborating, start looking at what has already worked for others and take it from there, right? Don't reinvent the wheel, make a faster car. So we're shipping all the time. So we don't even call it the MVP anymore. It's not the minimum viable product, it's the minimum testable product. If we can test it, it should be out there. Ship all features and test it, validate it. I think we've spoken enough about it. So, make in India. I mean, a lot of people came and told us, are you sure you want to make from India for the global audience? There's huge amount of, I mean, nobody has done that. You know, there's no talent available. You guys will struggle, you know. But the fact is it's possible. I mean, this is an example of what is possible. What you make best of the limited amount of resources available to you is what is going to define the success or define the make or break of it.
150. 24.
So, as I said, a lot of the times we had conviction crisis. For 3 years, we were building games under the rock somewhere. Nobody even knew about us. I mean, as Rajesh mentioned, we were down there. I mean, nobody even knew we existed. So a lot of the time we felt, you know, is global the right approach? A lot of people are talking about building games for India, from India and stuff like that. But then you have to make your own dog food, you have to eat it too. So I think it's a marathon race. It's not a 100-meter sprint that you're running. You have to be persistent, you have to last to the finish line. If you believe in your product, you will be all in. For us, we were all in. If, as I said, for us, if we had failed, we would have failed miserably. There are a lot of people in the industry who are handing out water to these marathoners, and they are doing a great deal to help people wherever they can. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank those people who have helped us in our journey. So what is my biggest satisfaction? I think I keep talking to my family and my wife, and for me the biggest satisfaction is that I have created 35 believers who now have the conviction to build great games. And they were, you know, just people like you and me. Nobody had built a hit game before. They never had the experience of all of that. But today they do. And they're even more motivated and they're even more committed to build greater things. And we're just only getting started. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Amit. That was very, very exciting.